You are live.
Thank you. I'd like to call the Finance and Infrastructure Committee meeting to order. It's Rachel. Okay, you moved, Rachel. I'm sorry. Rachel, would you call the roll?
Yes, good morning, Chair Balducci,
Here.
Regent Santiago,
Present.
Regent Stewart. Absence is noted. Regent Yang.
Here.
And Chairman Marty Gouet.
Present.
And welcome to the others that are on the call. Chair Balducci, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you just repeat the members that are present from the committee? I'm not sure. Was Regent Stewart on?
Regent Stewart is not expected this morning.
Okay, Regent Yang is on?
Yes,
Okay, and Santiago.
and Santiago, yep.
Great, thank you for that. With that, I'd like to have a motion to approve the minutes of the June 12th, 2024 meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and second. Any additions or deletions to the minutes? If not, I'll call for a roll. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed. Motion carried. Thank you. Moving right along, we have a couple of information items. The first item is the update on the reinstatement of student services by President Maduco. President Maduco, how are you this morning?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Regent Balducci, good morning, sir. I am well. Good to see you. Thank you.
I had made a couple of calls to you. I was hoping you got either both or at least one of them, and you hadn't called me back. I was wondering why that happened. If you didn't have
Yes, so we've been working tirelessly with the high school and the school district you brought to our attention, and we're now working closely with the principal directly in regards to the concerns they shared with us. So we actually have an update for you, the kind of list of the concerns they had shared with you and the steps we're taking to make sure that high school and the entire district is supported.
That's good to hear. And I know you have an update right now as to where we're headed as far as the student services go. Is it today, or is it going to be kind of superficial because of the consequences of having to deal with so many issues?
It's going to be pretty superficial, but again, we're here to answer any questions you and the other regions and members of the committee have for us. I'm joined today by our Vice President of Finance and Administration, Carrie Kelly. We have a slide deck in front of all of you to kind of just go over where we are right now, the steps we're taking, and our commitment to be ready with the plan and recommendations by next month's special Board of Regents meeting.
Good, that's good to hear. With that, then I will turn it over to you and Carrie and move right along. And members, if instead of waiting all the way to the end, if a member has a question on any particular one of the slides, just chime in. I'm sure it works better than trying to wait to the end. That's my philosophy on this kind of thing. So we'll follow it today. So we move right along, John.
Yeah, absolutely. So this gives, so to our audience and members of the community, this gives you an overview of just who we are as an institution and all of our locations. So though we have 12 main campuses, we have a litany of satellite locations across the state between Danbury and Derby and Bristol and Meriden and North Haven and Groton and Willimantic. So we just wanted to be kind of just transparent in terms of where we are serving our students. Last academic year, we served nearly 65,000 students. That represents 25% of all undergraduate students in the state of Connecticut. And of that 64,000, roughly 65,000 students, 5,000 of those students were high school students who were dually enrolled, and we're really proud about that. Next slide, Terry. So a credit student profile. So the average age of our student is 27. We have 40,000 plus students who are seeking a degree or a certificate. 27,000 plus students are first gen. 38,000, nearly 39,000 of our students are part-time. We're a predominantly student of color institution, and 30,000 of our students are working while attending CT State. So, we have a mosaic and litany of diversity across all the students we serve. We have about 300 credit programs across CT State, and as we mentioned in previous presentations, 98% of our students are from the state of Connecticut. Next slide, Carrie. So in terms of the resolution from the August 28th Board of Regents meeting that directed CT State to work on a plan to restore student services, the articulated areas of focus or areas that we should prioritize were library hours, tutoring services, disability services, academic advising and counseling, mental health and wellness, wraparound support like the food pantry, transportation, and childcare, and last but not least, emergency student funding. And we were supposed to look at what we did last academic year. So during the 23-24 academic year and the steps we took via the deficit mitigation plan to close our deficit and look at those various services per these categories that would be incorporated in the plan to restore student services. Gary, next slide. So our plan will do the following, right? We will align our plan and our recommendations to our current strategic priorities and goals. We will leverage, so we're sitting on a lot of student data. We've been leveraging our holistic student support survey over the past 2 academic years. So at the beginning of every academic semester, we ask our students, how are you doing? What levels of needs do you have? What's your impact? Tell us about yourself if you're working. Do you have transportation? And everything else. So we want to leverage that data and excuse the sirens from good old New Britain. Next, we recognize that no 2 academic years are the same. So we also want to make sure that we account for the students that are enrolled this academic year and this fall semester. We have to honor the principles of shared and participatory governance. So specifically, that means working with our college state senate at the statewide level, but also at the campus level. Each campus has their own local governance bodies, and also includes working with our bargaining units, and then provide a timeline to the full board regarding the implementation of this plan, identify the funding source, and be as transparent as possible. And with that transparency piece, we're going to launch a website that would list our plan and recommendations, right? And the steps that took to put it together. We're going to have appendices that provide all of the data that we're leveraging, from the survey data to the input from our campuses, and ensure that this is fully transparent to all stakeholders. Now, from a standpoint of developing the plan, this is where we are as of now. We have engaged all of our 12 main campus leaders for them to work locally with their campus stakeholders, from employees and student groups, to identify what are the local student needs. So that's 1. 2, we have a list of initial recommendations from all of our campuses that they submitted on the 27th of last month to Carrie Kelly and her team within the finance division, so they can start analyzing the cost of every single recommendation and request from our campuses. And then we have completed a survey working with our provost office to leverage the hours of operations of our student-facing services. I think that's and our satellite locations across our campus, satellite locations. So going back to making sure that we're accounting for this fall semester and the students that we're serving now. And then lastly, we're working in concert with our college senate leaders, right? We want to make sure that we provide to them a draft of the recommendations, right? So they can review it, but also ensure that we're getting their input as well, because these are elected representatives from all of our campuses. So they have the responsibility to work with their local constituents to ensure that they're gathering and gleaning just the insights and inputs from our faculty and staff. Next slide, Carrie. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we will be completely transparent. So every facet of our analysis, of our research, recommendations, the cost analysis, the engagement with our stakeholders. So the type of engagement wasn't email, wasn't in person, wasn't an open forum. It's all going to be published on a website dedicated to the restoration of student support services. Carrie, next. And as of now, we want to stop right here and give the platform for any of you who have any questions for Carrie or me.
When will this be available to all members of the board? even this incomplete version?
Yes.
So
President
what is it?
President
Sorry,
Meduca,
we,
wait, just to follow up on Chair Balducci's comment, if you could, at the close of the meeting, just forward out to everyone on this call the deck and copy the remaining people on the board. That's most helpful because we certainly do get questions out there in such a process that we've made public, and it's a question we want to answer and we like to answer, but we want to be aligned with your status.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Brendan, you have a question?
Yes, thanks for this update. And I do want to sort of emphasize the importance of shared governance. I believe my colleagues in CT State are very concerned that their voices are heard. And so I'm glad it seems like the timeline has adjusted to allow that to happen. But of course, in my mind, I'm asking, what is the end state we're working towards? Is it the December 27th start of the term where the adjustments will take place? Or is it the January 20th? And, you know, that space there is getting shorter. And
Yeah.
if there's, you know, hiring that needs to take place, like, how are you going to make that happen? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, Professor Cunningham, thank you for your question and good morning. So the first thing we wanted to do is not dismiss, ignore, or bypass our shared governance process. So we've been in constant communication with our college senate and president, Professor L. Vandermark. That's one. Two, we recognize time is not on our side, and I think we would all prefer to whatever recommendations are approved by our Board of Regents to adopt them and implement them as fast as possible. But we know that we have a responsibility to be transparent, to be thorough, to engage with a litany of stakeholders across the institution. So, I think it lies between the end of the fall semester and the beginning of the spring semester, right? In terms of making sure that the plan is clear cut. We know where the funding source is going to come from, and then we expedite the process by which we restore whatever facets of the plan and recommendations are approved.
Just a quick comment on that. Time is always our enemy when we're trying to get something done. However, getting it done properly as opposed to quickly, I think is more important. And it would make more sense to me, and you could correct me, if we wait until the January implementation so that everything is, you have more time, John, you and your group, et cetera, to put this in place, to look at it again, review it, and then move forward, as opposed to trying to get it done sometime in December. Now, that's my thought. I'll wait for your comments on that, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, Regent Balducci, Chair Balducci, I agree. Like, I want to do it well, and we want to do it well to make sure that we hold our students and our campuses and our employees harmless. I think that's the most responsible way to do it. But I think to Chair Guay's comment, I know you guys are getting flooded with questions from everyone, right? So we're balancing the two realities, but we know that we're going to land this plane and do it in a way that benefits our students.
Thank you.
And I would ask you, President Meduco, I know Professor Sasanker is not on this call, but she does represent CT State on the Board of Regents. So if you could include her on all distributions going forward.
Yeah, we'll do.
It's always very thoughtful.
Charlene Casamento has her hand raised.
can I,
Oh,
Yeah,
I
Charlie.
actually?
Thank you. I appreciate the update. Just a couple of things I wanted to share in case it was helpful. At Central Connecticut State University, we implemented an emergency student funding process that predominantly relied on our foundation, and there was a pretty significant fundraising effort that took place. So I throw that out as a potential tool for your toolbox. The other thing, and again, drawing upon the 10 years I was in the system, is the UPass program. When it was implemented, the amount of funding that students were paying was intended so that some of the routes could be further developed to meet the needs of our institutions. And so I'm not sure to what extent an analysis has been done, to what extent the routes have changed to meet those needs. But again, keying in on your slide on resolution to restore and meeting some of the needs of students, sharing in case that information is helpful.
Yeah, good morning, Undersecretary Casamento. Thank you for those suggestions, and we'll definitely, apply that, those ideas to this process. I know with our foundations, for everyone's knowledge, we have 12 foundations, right? So we want to make sure that when we're done with this process, I plan to communicate directly with our 12 foundations to want to get their take on this. Obviously, they're independent entities, and they do great work as it is, including emergency funding and needs-based scholarships. But is there any way for maybe we work in partnership, right, to address the needs from a campus perspective? And then from the UPass and transportation, we are in early conversations with rideshare companies, including Uber, in terms of potentially subsidizing their fares to meet the needs of our students. Because even with the UPass, bus lines do end. So there are students who are left stranded on campuses, right? So we're looking at every possible out-of-the-box way to meet our students where they are. But I really, commend those suggestions, and we know Central does great work. So we are not bashful. We will leverage whatever great ideas are out there for the betterment of this process. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Ted, is that you? Ted, you have a question? Comment?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, just to point out, the moving in factor should be the same time that other people are getting this. So if there are, faculty sentiments, whatever, this can be certainly should be seen as documents at the same time. I appreciate all the comments that were said earlier about timing of here, but it does feel like we are ourselves out of the loop and time is short. So I want to retract the point that we raised earlier in the prior meetings regarding the sustainability of these cuts, right? So not just what the restoration of these cuts. It's not just what those are and the process that goes through this, but it's also that this committee is satisfied that they are sustainable going forward. So all that will take time, and we haven't seen anything yet. So again, time is short, and you're trying to find the right process. And I want to make sure that this committee is part of that process. And so far, we have been part of this process.
Regent Yang, I had heard most of what you said. It got a little choppy from a connectivity point of view to maybe just be in this room. But what I did hear from you was speaking about the importance of the sustainability of these ads, that we want to make sure that we put them back, that they can stay back. Is that the essence of your comment?
Yeah, that's right. And we this committee hear about that.
Okay.
Any other comments?
Hey, thank you, Regent Yang. Carrie, can you go into detail about just the process now that we've kind of collected the initial round of information from our campuses, the process that you and our acting provost, Dr. Karen Heineck, will adopt in terms of the costing and the assessment, but we know that sustainability is going to be a question on the minds of everyone.
Yes, hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Kelly. I'm the Vice President of Finance and Administration for CT State. So we received the initial requests and recommendations from the campus leaders. My team is reviewing them and cross-referencing them with the FY24 deficit mitigation plan and that which annualized into FY25. So we can ensure that those are things that meet the criteria of the resolution, as it was things that are impacted by deficit mitigation. And we're reviewing it for the areas that were enumerated as being student facing. And we're sort of stratifying those lists and going through it. We're working to ensure that we have accurate costing of these proposals. And then we're going to be reviewing them centrally, making some recommendations. We expect that we'll have a plan early next week to share with the College Senate. The College Senate Budget and Finance Committee will be meeting on the 22nd of the month, and then the full College Senate will be meeting on the 25th. So we'll be working closely with them as we shape these recommendations to bring back to you for the November special board meeting.
Pam, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. Prior to the special board meeting in November, it is our hope and plan to have a special finance committee meeting, as well as a special academic and student services committee meeting to present that final plan before it is presented to the full board at their special November meeting. As any resolution to adopt this proposal needs to run through committees prior to the presentation to the full board. So I'll be polling for dates for a special finance committee meeting and a special AASA meeting this week.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody aware? President Maduka, do you want to continue on? Is there anything else?
Yeah, the only thing else I want to add is just, my appreciation not only to the board for prioritizing this need, but really our thanks to our College Senate, to our campus leaders, to our stakeholders and our employees across our campuses. It's been a busy semester. We are up in enrollment by 4%. Parking lots are packed, so a lot of great energy. But people have prioritized, this resolution, and we are looking forward to producing the final report and plan and recommendations to the board. So again, we thank you for your time. But if there's additional energy, but people have. Okay, that's not me. If there's additional information at any time, please feel free to reach out to myself and Carrie, and we can produce that for you.
Thank you very much for that, John. Thank you for your report. Look forward to the more completed version in detail. And as we move forward for those students who will benefit, I think it's a great idea and a great plan. And, we thank the chairman and the members of this Board of Regents for their support. Okay, moving along. The next item we have before us is the Long Wharf issue, which I had issues with until I was kindly told by Lloyd that this was something that was passed and reinforced by the legislature. And having a little bit of background in that, this is going to move forward. It was just a matter of finite points that they had to make. I'll turn it over to Keith Epstein, who has done this many times for us, and give us a quick background on this.
Morning. So in 2012, CT State Gateway relocated from their North Haven campus and their Sergeant Drive location, which is in the Long Wharf district of New Haven, to downtown New Haven. The North Haven campus still has their automotive program running out of it that occurs, and the Sergeant Drive location has been vacant ever since. We've looked at a number of different options to reuse the site. None of them have panned out. The city has addressed with us the ability to use or collaborate with them on the Long Wharf district redevelopment, which Sergeant Drive sits in that Long Wharf district. Sergeant Drive is Sergeant Drive, which is a 2-acre site. 60 Sergeant Drive, it's a 5.25 acre site. The city's redevelopment, again, includes our area, and June of 2023 legislation was passed that had us transfer the property to the city of New Haven. In return, they would provide an equal alternative for us to relocate our site to. There are other contingencies that were involved with the legislation that weren't able to be completed. So that more or less didn't occur. Since then, the city has asked for us to continue our collaboration. We would keep our 5-acre site at 60 Sergeant Drive. We would use that towards the redevelopment of Gateway's automotive program. And we would sell for fair market value 0 Sergeant Drive, which is 2 acres again, to the city of New Haven towards the redevelopment of the Long Wharf district. We also have Michael Piscatelli from New Haven. If you have specific questions on the Long Wharf development itself, he's available to answer the questions. This is Again, for informational purposes only, the city would like us to enter into an MOA towards the development of the site. Any final approvals require board approval, require OPM's approval, require the AG's approval. So there's still a lot that has to happen. A fair market value of selling Sergeant Drive would be 2 appraisals, one from the city, one from the BOR that we would obtain. So there's still a little distance to go and more information to provide to you. And we thought it would be important to update you at this point in time.
Appreciate that, Keith. I don't know if anyone has any questions, but the Sergeant Drive area down along Long Wharf is a somewhat valuable property down there. And I'm sure the board and the city will arrive at probably 2 different numbers, and somewhere in between should be something that's doable. And we'll end up knowing we have you, Keith, there doing that process for us. I feel very comfortable. Are there any questions for Keith on the Long Wharf issue? Thanks, Keith. That's very nice of you to do that. Appreciate it. Moving right along, we have Lloyd who'll talk about our accountability report. And that is somewhat important, and we ought to be paying attention to that one, members. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Regents. The accountability report is still a work in progress. What you will see in your packet, starting on page 32, is the accountability report rolled up to the system-wide level. And then subsequent to page 32 is the same report for each institution. What this report will show, it starts with a format that looks very much like the annual spending plans that you approve. And then we start with the second column is the budget that you approve. Now, one thing strange happened in FY25 is the reason why we still have some work to do on this report. In FY25, the board approved the spending plan that did not include monies that we received from the state, the RSA adjustments. To be clear, we got $80 million in the FY25 budget, if you recall, from the spring session. That spring session provided some funds, some one-time funds to help us with CPAC increases. Subsequent to that action, subsequent to your approval of that plan, OPM then announced that they would provide $14 million in RSA funds, which will increase the block grant. Because we wanted to show you in this report the baseline that you approved, we do not have in the math of the report the $14 million. So we put that in a footnote. The change that I will make to this report and then send it back out to you this week will be, I will add another column that will show the column for FY25 budget that you see now that was approved by the board. I will show a column of adjustments based on current fall semester. And then I will show an update to the FY25 budget based on those adjustments so that you can see, 1, the budget that you approved, and 2, adjustments that were made after you approved that budget, so that you can see all adjustments to the approved budget, so that it's very clear the baseline we're starting from. Right now, we do not have that $14 million in these numbers. The consequence.
I was just going to ask a quick question if I could, like.
Sure.
That 14.4 million, that's money returned to us or given to us by the state in reference to the CBAC contracts, correct?
So typically, when the state passes a CBAC wage increase, they give us some share of that increase in the form of an increase in the block grant. The last couple of years, they've been using one-time funds to fund those increases. And then we have to come back and ask for the annualization of those increases. This year, they gave us some one-time funds, and then after you approved the budget, they came in with $14 million worth of RSA. So $14 million will be added to this report that you're reading now on page 32, and it'll show a larger surplus that's projected for FY25.
So we're looking at just ballpark, $4 million plus 14, so we're looking at 17 million and change.
As a projected surplus for the current fiscal year.
course, yes.
Now, we have spoken with the CFOs and suggested that they hold on to the ARPA monies that they receive because the increase in the CBAC wages will be paid for by the RSA. The monies that they got, one-time funds to pay for that increase, they should hold on to partly to pay for the other half of the CBAC increase and the sort of headwinds that they're facing with regard to.
And there's no more money coming in.
We do not expect any more money to come in from the state. That's correct.
Just, you have a question, Marty?
No, just a comment. There is no more money coming.
That's correct.
I just have a quick question, Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me. Lloyd, we have 14 million coming in, and this relates to a contract or a contract period or an event. And then can you just talk about the timing of this all? Like when our costs increase versus when we get the money, how long the money lasts, how long the cost increase lasts, this whole timing and matching principle in accounting.
Okay, so one of the things we find, one of the things a lot of people don't understand, Mr. Chair, that we do regularly in budgeting is we're always operating in 3 fiscal years. We're always looking at the past fiscal year. For example, right now we're auditing FY24.
Right.
We are in FY25, and we are planning for, and we'll ask for your approval for FY26 and 27. So with regard to the current fiscal year, you passed a budget to approve the spending in June of last year, of this year. Excuse me. Yeah. Current fiscal year started in July 1, so you approved the spending plan in June of this year. So July 1, we started FY25, except the state just passed the session that ended in the spring, just provided the extra $80 million for us, maybe 2 months before we began spending it. Okay, so we're always looking about 9 months in advance of any fiscal year to plan for it. And then we don't know what we're going to get from the legislature until just a couple of months before the beginning of the fiscal year. So this $14 billion was a decision made by the state, OPM in particular, that came after the board approved the spending plan, the budget. So this was just unusual timing. This, sometimes things are slow and sometimes they come in on time. This was just a situation where the RSA decision was made after the legislature made its decision.
Sure, wants to clarify. Sure.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify a little bit on the timing. So OPM provided notice to CSU on June 10th as part of its B1 guidance that went out. I recognize that guidance, which went out to all agencies, including CSU on June 10th, was before the June 12th fiscal meeting. Well, I recognize was only 2 days before the Finance Committee. I'm not sure I would agree with the commentary that it was late. It was provided to CSU along with the rest of state government on the cycle and timeframes that we provided. And it was in advance of your Finance Committee meeting. So again, I just wanted to share some of the factual dates and timeframes as I understand them. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Regent Casamento. I stand corrected. They did provide it to us a couple of days before the board meeting, but as you know, Mr. Chair, we send out materials a full week in advance of board meetings.
Charlene, it's a great point you make, and I really appreciate you making it. There is a digestion period of information that the board is not in this real time, all the time. So they try and give us some oxygen, which is time to prep for all this information. So I think these things came in at the same time, and we already had our material with us, but we did hear about it verbally in that meeting. So I would say that I've heard about this 14 million for a few months now, but we appreciate your clarity and anything you can do to help us in real time is always appreciated.
So with the accountability report, I want to make another change to the format so that it incorporates that 14 million in each of the slides for each of the institutions. So you can see how their projections for FY25 will change with the incorporation of that number. We are very mindful of the ability to trace your decisions, which is one of the reasons why we really do. Anytime we make a report,
Right.
we start from what you have approved.
And from a reporting perspective, any report that we request, if the system office or the institutions within the system can't benefit from that report, we're not asking for the right report. This should be a report that benefits all of us, and the information should be a way for all of us to stay aligned together. So the reporting should be a benefit for all.
Agreed. So you will see in general, if you just start on page 32, and you'll see a similar pattern for each institution, but I'm only going to refer to system-wide. The pattern you will see is that we've received about 53%, or just over half, of all of the student revenue. So if you look at tuition, student fees, and then go further down with housing and food service, those are the major student revenue items. And you'll notice that they're coming in anywhere from 52% to 55%. That's because we collect student fees 2 times a year, fall and spring. You will also see with the state appropriations, which is the third line, it records we've gotten about 25% of the state appropriations. Let me explain. At the beginning of the year, system office gets all state appropriations from the state. And then we allot the universities and the colleges a share of that appropriations. It's a standard budgeting and financial management practice in the public sector as a financial control so that people don't spend money too quickly throughout the year. So we allot it basically 25% at a time. You'll see that's why this first report shows that we've received 25% of the state appropriations. So that really represents the revenues, and that's why revenues are about 40% of budget. About 50% for student revenue, about 25% for state appropriations, and then a small amount of other. As it relates to the expenditures, you'll find that the expenditures will track the timing of the year. So if you're about a quarter of the way through the year, 3 months in, you should expect spending to be about 25% of budget. We see here that it is 21% of budget. That just means we're doing well by not spending as much as you might expect. Spending is not as lumpy as revenues. Spending is pretty steady throughout the fiscal year because most spending, about 80% of it, will go out via payroll every 2 weeks. So that's why you'll see spending tracking with the calendar year, the fiscal year rather, and revenues will be somewhat lumpy based on the source. Any questions?
Yeah, Ted, you had a question?
Yeah, can you guys hear me any better?
Yes.
All right, because I know I have problems with my audio. So, thank you, Lloyd, that you anticipated a question that I had about really the run rate of this. I think for this report, it would be good to see the deltas in terms of the tuitions monies, because that is somewhat variable based upon enrollment and what have you, as well as the delta regarding expenditures related to personnel as in headcount, right? Because those are where we have variations. So we can discuss that now or later, but I think it would be good to add to this report those items specifically so that we know what is driving. Because again, right now, just looking at any of these schools, the line that says personnel services that's 21%, say for Eastern, doesn't tell me where they are in terms of their net headcount, right? If that's changed at all. Similarly, tuition at 52% doesn't tell me whether that was what was expected according to the budget or the run rate of the budget, or if it wasn't.
Those are great suggestions, Regent Yang. Thank you. We can add those to the report.
Good idea, Ted.
Brendan.
Brendan, you had a comment?
Yeah, maybe I can fill in some of those blanks. So if we look at the amounts above 50 on the student-related payments, those, so that average is about 3% over 50. I'm using 50 as a baseline because if it's 2 semesters, half should be coming in. And then if I do my math correctly, it looks like we're plus 10 million in student payments. That 3% represents a 10 million bump relative to what we might expect halfway through the year. As I said, I was just trying to fill that in on my own. So if I add all of this up, the 14.4 million in RSA, the 8 million on the RIP, remember the 2 largest bargaining units did not take the RIP. So that's an 8 million in the black there. And then the 10 million from an additional enrollment, that gives us 32.4 million positive delta is what I'm seeing. I could be wrong, but I'm trying to back of the envelope this for the reasons outlined by Regent Yang.
I would say thank you, Professor Cunningham.
Okay. Charlene, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. So I think this is great, and I really appreciate the information. The one thing this doesn't tell you is how the fall semester impacts where you expect to end up. So it certainly allows you to compare, but the enrollment, and again, I'm going back a couple years, but when I would forecast enrollment, it was pretty common that the fall was a stronger enrollment period, and on average, you could run 7 to 11% less in the spring. And that was true for enrollment and also for housing. Now, granted, that might be different for CT State versus Charter Oak versus the CSUs, but it would be, I think, helpful for the regents to be able to say, okay, here's this information, but what does it mean in terms of recalibrating where we expect to end up? So in taking into account Regent Cunningham's point of, there's a lot of positive things, set the 14 million aside, that were different. What does that all mean for each institution? Because not each of the institutions have different challenges and opportunities and strengths. And I think being able to appreciate that would be helpful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any comments? Any further comments that we have?
I just want to clarify the point Charlene made. It's somewhat, you're looking for somewhat of a sensitivity analysis, right?
I guess I would call it a reforecasting, right? So each of the institutions, and again, I can't speak for what other institutions did, but at Central, after the fall semester freeze, we would take all the data we have, figure out how we were running, not just at that moment in time, but what it meant in terms of our full year's projection, right? So does that fall enrollment now cause our estimate to the end of the year to be higher or lower, or just completely on target? So it's essentially a reforecast. It'd be a comparison of the spending plan, plus or minus the changes that Lloyd talked about. And then essentially another column would be, well, now where do you think you're going to end up based on this new data for the end of the year? And you'd have pluses and minuses. And if Regent Cunningham's estimate was the only thing happening at the bottom, you'd see 32.4 million maybe pop out if there weren't if it wasn't already incorporated into adjustments to the spending plan.
So
Yeah.
so this is,
If I could add to that, sorry. Just I think here really the explanation part of this as well, right? Just kind of like when you read financial statements, you read for the footnotes kind of thing, right, Lloyd? So I think everything that Charlene and Brendan says is valid, and then it would be good, again, in a future version of this to say, okay, here's a footnote that explains why this is reforecast or why this is coming in differently, right? Because that is really the level in which we're making decisions.
Good
Okay.
point, Ted, yeah.
These are all very helpful. Thank you. As a reminder to the regents, this is the first time we've produced this accountability report, which was called for by the regents. We will continue to modify it as the regents see necessary to give them what they are looking for. What I hear now is not only sort of an accountability report, which by its name tends to be a backward-looking report. We can certainly do more forecasting within the context of the accountability report. We'll have to work with the CFOs to determine what that looks like. But thank you so much for the recommendations.
And it's important to remember, and Ted may have just mentioned it, or Charlene, this is the first time go around. So like any other program, you have to, tweak it here, tweak it there. But some of the additions that, Brendan made and Charlene made, and certainly Ted made, I mean, we'll take those into consideration. Certainly, I'm not an expert at this because this isn't what I do every day, but it's interesting. It's something I like to do, but I want to do it correctly and what's best for the institutions that we represent. So I thank you all for those comments. Is your hand still up, Charlene? You want to speak again?
No, sorry, Chair Balducci, I can pull my hand down.
Okay.
I would suggest, I know it's unsolicited, but you make a fair point, Lloyd, and this is an accountability report. And we had a couple of puts and takes in today's meeting of how to handle 14 million and some other things. I would get this report kind of locked down, and once people agree on it, then you kind of use that as a step 2.0 is to kind of create a forecast report with it. But I think, in the awareness of scope creep, you don't want to add too many things into the original intent, which was to create an accountability report that we really like. And I think there's a need, or there's a desire for others to also want a forecast report, and that's terrific. But let's get this one to fly first, right?
We can do that. We can do that. Thank you.
I just have two other comments on this, and hopefully it's simple. I always get
Chair Balducci, if I could just jump in real quick, only because my comment was really right on top of Marty's, or really Marty just stole my thunder, but which I totally appreciate. But I just wanted to sort of second that concept that we've got some great ideas here. I'd really love to see the accountability report run all the way to ground before we start layering on a whole bunch more stuff. So I can't say it better than Marty did. I'll just second what he put forward and look forward to finalizing this first report.
Thanks, I appreciate that. My comment just was, I always get nervous when I see other expenses. I'm not sure why, but in the past, it's always interesting what's tossed into or covered by. And I would ask Lloyd, you had already commented to me, right, but when you're looking at $326 million in the budget,
Sure.
I'd like to know what those basically are.
So I can do that. If you will look at the other institutional levels, you'll see how that 326 is divided. But it's a very good point because we can show financial aid, utility costs, waiver costs, as well as other
IT, is IT included in it?
Absolutely.
So big numbers, okay. And the other one is it under the total transfers, it says CCSU.
So you want me to break those out as well?
Yeah, would be, yes, but it's CCSU, it's not CS.
Yeah, that's my fault.
Okay, so it's basically, yeah, okay, I don't want to go to
that's a typo.
President Toro.
That's a typo.
Yeah, okay, I thought that was, but if we could just break out those transfers, that would be good too.
I can do that.
Thank you.
I can do that. We start from a place of trying to simplify the data that we present to the board. So this is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work and your group. I know Melantina's probably in the back shaking her head, but she does a great job.
In reports, I mean, just from a philosophical point of view, these are reports that should be things that we work with, from this meeting, people inside the system. They should be, things that we can make decisions off of or spur new ideas. reports should never be weaponized. They should be tools to make the system better. And I agree with Chair Balducci, when you have other expenses, it's such a big chunk. Miscellaneous or other expenses should be a small percent. And then if it's big, we should call it out. But again, this is an evolution. I think you've done a really nice job in your team laying out a good format, and we'll iterate to finality and then use that going forward. And then to Ari's point, then we can step into future state. What do we need, right?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Those are our information items, and we actually have 3 action items. The first 2 are going to be discussed by Keith again. One deals with the telecom licensing agreement at Manchester and a host of others. Keith, would you?
Sure. In 2020, House Bill 7152 passed that promotes the installation of 5G cellular antenna on state property. Based from that House bill, Singular Wireless asked us if they could install a 5G 37-foot small antenna similar to a light pole in a parking lot at Manchester. We negotiated an agreement out with them. It's in the corner of a parking lot. It won't look much different than a light pole. And all the infrastructure is paid for and maintained by the cellular provider and Singular Wireless, and the electricity. They have a direct feed from the street, so they pay for their own electricity. They just simply maintain their site. We give them a license agreement to install the pole, and they pay an annual lease. We negotiated 4% increase annually. The base amount is $5,270. The rent starts the day they become operational. Pretty simple deal. Requires board approval, AG approval. Section 4B38 of state statutes allows the board to lease or license sites occupied by the colleges and universities.
Is that a 20-year contract also?
It's a 4-term, 5-year each term.
Renewable every 5 years, or it's reopened every 5 years, so, okay. Any other comments by any members on this, on the Manchester?
Just a quick question. This and the next one is, how did you determine whether this is the rate or not?
Ted, you're breaking up for me, Ted. Did you say, how did they determine what the appropriate rate for the rental is?
Yes.
So, yeah, so the cellular providers all know what each other charges, and there is a basic going rate. We try to negotiate it up each time. We usually tell them, no, we have to come up with more. Usually we end up negotiating up on the escalation. As you can see, this agreement has 4% escalation. We didn't think the initial term was as strong as it could have been, so we're able to get a little more escalation in the deal. At some point, they just say no and walk away if they're not interested, but we push it as much as we can.
Ari, do you want to comment on this also?
Well, I guess I just was sort of similar, I think. I'm just trying to understand the differential, because the Verizon deal on the next resolution I think we'll discuss just seems significantly more, and I'm just trying to understand the differential. Looks like perhaps we constructed the tower that Verizon's using, so we get extra because we did the capital improvements. I'm just trying to get educated around what the differential is on these 2 deals.
Yeah, that's a question I was waiting to bring in, both yours and Ted's. I've already talked to Keith about it. He'll answer that again, but I just wanted to get this one done. And unless there's specifically more questions on this one, I'd like to move it along, because yes, there are some questions on the other ones, the other telecom agreement.
Well, Chair Balducci, excuse me. So just, if I understand what you're saying, you're asking for us to approve this resolution before we have the conversation around the differences between the 2?
Well, not between the 2, between all the others that follow. If you look through and went through them, Ari, you'll see that each institution has one, and one is $5,000 a month, another is $30,000.
Correct.
And that's where the discussion I wanted to take place. on the next resolution. If you want, it's
I
kind of,
just, I think it would be helpful if we could just have it now, because I just want to, if we could just have them before approval, just so we can understand what we're talking about before we approve, that'd be my preference.
okay, then why don't we do that? Keith?
Sure. We annually get approached by the cellular providers
Here,
uh,
what did I say?
to place some type of infrastructure at our sites. It could be on a roof, it could be a telephone pole type of installation, like we just talked about for Manchester, or in the case of Eastern, back in 2002, I believe, they constructed a 180-foot antenna. And for multiple cellular providers to put an installation on, as well as about a 10 by 20 square foot, 10 by 20 square size building adjacent to the antenna for them to put their infrastructure in also. So in the case of an Eastern installation, it's a much larger installation. The installation occurs on our infrastructure, and there's a license for them to use not only the antenna, but also space in our conditioned building that we maintain. So again, for Eastern, we were attracted by, or Verizon was attracted by a space that opened up on our tower that Nextel had. And they had approached us to provide an installation on that available space. It's really straightforward. Every time a space opens up, one of the providers will contact us with an interest to provide installation. In the case of Eastern, there's an importance to this. There's 4 cell service, so the students do rely on this. So not only is it helpful to the students, it creates a small revenue source, and it occupies an available space on our infrastructure. As far as Verizon, year one is $30,000 for their annual rent. Consider that fair and reasonable compared to the other deals we've negotiated. We also have a similar cell tower at Western. So we see what's being paid also at Western site for comparison purposes. Saw the fee at $30,000 to be more than we've seen. When I say more, maybe 28,000, maybe another installation that was offered. So as you can see, the escalation on that is on the lower side. We weren't able to negotiate higher escalation for the Eastern Tower. I don't know if you have any questions.
So I just, if you could just clarify, I'm just trying to tease out the detail of all the information that you just shared, which it sounds like the reason for the discrepancy or the difference, excuse me, in the monthly rental has to do with the fact that in the singular installation, they are doing the capital improvements and maintaining and essentially just leasing land, whereas in the other one, they're actually leasing pre-built capital infrastructure, which we maintain, and therefore they're paying a higher amount. Is that a accurate summary?
Fair statement, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And that escalation can change, Keith, the 2%, for instance, at Eastern, and was it 4%? I guess, I can't remember, at Manchester, that type of thing, correct?
When we negotiated.
Exactly. And then we have a reopener every 5 years on that also, Aria. That, I think you probably heard that. Brendan, comment?
Yeah, so I'd like to provide some ground truth about internet service at Eastern. And I don't know how my CIO is going to feel about this, but in our academic buildings, when the students all get here, the Wi-Fi gets too congested. And so the solution has been to disable Wi-Fi access on cell phones. And essentially what that does is push the students onto the tower. Because we just don't have the bandwidth apparently to handle capacity when classes begin. I see it happen, 8 a.m. class starts and my cell phone internet access disappears. Faculty are using this technology to teach increasingly, and we're asking our students to pay with their own bandwidth if we ask them to access an internet resource. I would actually encourage the regions to think about this carefully, because if we have a telecoms operator in the mix here, $30,000 is not going to make a whole lot of difference, but improving the bandwidth and dealing with the congestion in our academic buildings would mean a great deal to students who again are implicitly paying for internet access on these towers because our Wi-Fi is too congested. My second comment is that I don't understand why these don't go out to auction. If you auction something like this, then you don't have to negotiate. They can battle it out through the auction and they can potentially pay the maximum of everyone involved in it. So those are my two comments on this. And I hope you'll consider my remarks about bandwidth congestion in our academic buildings very seriously.
Hey,
Thanks, Brendan.
Professor
Martin.
Cunningham, yeah, I think those are good points. I know Lloyd was taking notes because this falls under his area. And also you're in luck because Ted Yang and Ari sit on the IT committee and they are now fully aware that we're not optimized at Eastern. So I know they will follow up on it. Although I think the same person managing the tower at Eastern is probably managing the router at Ted's house. We'll have to fix both.
Yeah, right. But that's good. You both have that.
Yeah. Just to myself, I could be screwed.
So between you, Ted and Ari, we're looking forward to coming up with some suggestions. Really, and I mean that seriously.
No, yeah, I appreciate that, Rich. Chair Balducci, we'll definitely do that. I did want to just make the point, though, that separate from the comment around the auction, the do or do not on the cell tower lease, I don't think has any direct bearing on the Wi-Fi speeds inside of Eastern. So.
Interesting. Thank you. I was going to say something. I forgot what the hell it was. Okay. Any other comments on this first resolution dealing with Manchester? If not, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Thank you. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have a resolution. Okay. I'm sorry? Yes. We're moving along to the second resolution dealing with Eastern, which I think we probably discussed in conjunction with the previous resolution. Any other comments about that? Would you just pick up any pieces we didn't touch on, Keith, on the Eastern one? It sounds like we pretty much covered it all, but.
I did, yeah, it's again, 20 years, 5-year increments on the lease, $30,000 a year with 2% escalation annual.
Okay, just for my question I have basically says, the comment was brought up about auctioning. Now, that may be a possibility, but because Verizon needs a tower there, doesn't mean that any of the others are interested in doing that. But does it make sense anyway to do that kind of thing? The kind of comment Brendan made about putting it out to auction, you may never know if anybody else is interested. And I didn't know if you had any comment on that.
Well, it's an excellent suggestion. We've always taken it as first come, first serve, and just fill the next slot. We haven't competitively sought a market for it. We've just negotiated each deal out one at a time. So I think that's a great option, and we should explore what other options are. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for that, Brendan. I think that's a good point. I think Keith will take that into consideration as we move forward. Thank you for that, Keith. Any other comments? Yes.
Just one. If we're going to be looking at Eastern, let's query that we don't have the same issue elsewhere to make sure that we have the right Wi-Fi services for our students and faculty. They got a job to do, and communication is top of the list to get it done well.
Agreed.
Good. Okay, no other comments or questions? I make a motion that we adopt the resolution dealing with Eastern Connecticut State University telecommunication. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The resolution's adopted. Okay, the last item we have deals with the biennial budget. With that, I'm going to turn that over to Lloyd to go through this.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, every other year, the state seeks out guidance to the agencies and the constituent units of higher education to submit their biennium requests. These biennium requests come in two forms. One part of the request is due in September 1 every other year for the current services budget. So we submitted our current services budget on September 1. Rachel, can you go ahead and get the latest slides up? On October 1, the state requires for the agencies and higher education units to submit their policy options budget. The policy options budget is meant to be a request for additions to or subtractions from the current services budget. Now, the tricky part about this is, and if you can maximize that, is that maximized?
Yes.
The tricky part about this is we're really talking about the revenues that we request from the state. We don't really present to the state a spending plan or what those revenue requests are based on. So what I would like to do is show you 3 slides. One, just make that smaller a little bit. Okay, 3 slides. The first slide here will show you what our request looks like relative to resources we received from the state in FY25, the current fiscal year. And then I'll show you the next 2 slides will show the deficit mitigation that we underwent to ask for less than we would have otherwise. And I also will show you what we are projecting by way of a deficit for FY26 and 27. So this slide shows you FY25 dollars. We received $611 million from the state in the current fiscal year. 156 million of those dollars were in the form of temporary support. So of that 156 million, 124 is ARPA funds. The other 27 or so is the carry forward funds that we receive from the state as additional temporary support. We are asking for $60 million less than we received in the current fiscal year. So our requests for FY26 and FY27 will amount to $551 million in each of those years. Now, what you will see on this slide will be a little tricky because if you look at the institutions, CSUs captures a combined appropriation for the 4 universities. CT State, of course, is the appropriation for the community college, Charter Oak, and then the remainder is the BOR appropriations. You'll see increases from 25 to 26 on this slide, but they are misleading. Why? Because the FY25 numbers are the block grant numbers. The 5 elements below the BOR, where it says developmental education, outcome-based funding, O'Neill Chair, PACT, and other, excuse me. Those are what we would call legislative initiatives. So the block grant is that first 4 lines in 25. The next 5 are legislative initiatives, and then the temporary support is that 3rd piece. What you're going to see in FY26 and 27 is 0. We are expecting no temporary support from the state. So whatever we are asking for, we're asking for in the form of an increase to the block grant. Again, there will be no temporary support, or we're expecting no temporary support in FY26 and 27. That means that $156 million that we received in 25 will go away, and we are asking for a little bit of help on the block grant side to cover what we cannot cover in our own deficit mitigation. Next slide, please. So this slide will show you the extent to which we have been able to plan for mitigation in FY 26 and 27. Next slide, please. So this will show you institution by institution.
Sorry about that.
You're fine, you're fine. This slide shows you that we are planning to mitigate $95 million to help deal with the fact that we will not receive over $150 million in temporary support. This $95 million mitigation comes in two forms. Comes in the form of expenditure reductions and in the use of reserves. For FY 26, we are planning to mitigate our budgets by $40 million. And we're planning on using $55 million in reserves. That's FY 26. For FY 27, we are planning on reducing our spending by $37 million and adding $58 million in reserves. So we are considering the reserves that we have as unspent appropriations, Mr. Chair. And that's why we decided in this biennium that we would be aggressive in the use of reserves, given that they were unspent appropriations, so that the state knows that we are using all of the dollars it provides us and lowering our BOR in terms of sort of prudent reserve levels.
Yeah, I just a comment on that. I think I think the money's there. We do know that we're looking to get the system, you know, with the MCHEMS report and with the SIP work, with the BOR work, with all the system work, all the work done at the institutional level, that we're looking to get more healthy going on. So we know that we're going to be stronger in the future, but I think this money is there. And we're also being told that there are no ARPA funds. It's not what we think, that's what we're being told. So we've got to adjust accordingly. And I think this plan reflects that next step.
So to be clear, we are mitigating $95 million in each year of the biennium, 40 million thereabouts coming from expenditure reduction, and 50 or more million coming from reserves as a general way to distinguish those two. Next slide. So what this deficit mitigation plan will allow us to do is balance budgets for 3 of our 6 institutions. Central, CT State, and Charter Oak, we're projecting balanced budgets for each year of the biennium. For Eastern, Southern, and Western, we still have some ways to go. And so we are asking for $23 million in FY 26 and $22 million in FY 27, because we feel like we've mitigated as much as we can before more drastic changes would need to be made. And so we wanted to make sure we showed the state leadership that we will go as far as we can go, but we need a little help to go the rest of the way. So with $95 million in mitigation, we are asking for the state to help us with 23 million in 26 and 22 million in 27. That's my presentation, Mr. Chair. Happy to answer your questions.
Good. Thank you. Yes. I had a couple of questions just to go over. Maybe you've already partially answered some of them. One of them had to do at the bottom, the explanation on the bottom of page 20, where it talks about the RSA received after the board approves the spending plan. Could you just clarify that for at least me?
So the previous issue that I raised with regard to the accountability report,
Right.
We separated the RSA to show you the changes from an approved budget. And we wanted to make sure that we put the note in the RSA so that you knew there was still 14 million.
Okay.
This biennium projection includes that $14 million. So the 14 million is in the base of 25 before we make these 26 and 27 projections.
It wasn't clear on that. Thank you. On page 21, the numbers at the bottom, I'm just trying to figure out how we got to 27.1, 3.9 and 25, deficit of 27, et cetera, et cetera. I'm trying to make those numbers work for me, and I'm just trying to figure out where those numbers come from.
So we've been making some adjustments to these budgets continually up until last week, partly because we were developing our strategy about what to ask and what to mitigate. So those numbers have been changing. This is probably a number that needs to be updated, sir.
To somewhere ballpark me on a number.
It should be 23 million and 22 million.
Okay, that's what you said earlier, and
That's correct.
okay, and I'm trying to, okay. Then I looked at page 22. Looks like a pretty nice wish list. Isn't that basically what that is? I mean, everybody wants something, and some of those are, I just wrote down wish lists as I went through them.
So
I mean, many of them need to be done. I understand, code compliance is absolutely necessary. We have to try and get those things done. And however, some of them look like they may be able to be put off, but that's a fairly large number that we're looking for in 26 and 27.
So my guidance to Keith, our Vice President for Facilities, was to try to maintain our capital request at around $200 to $250 million a year. This amount is necessary for the large number of capital assets that we maintain across the state. We've got billions and billions of dollars worth of assets. Our deferred maintenance probably is close to $200 million, though I didn't expect to cite that number, so I'll have to get back to you on the precise number. But the capital request essentially should address the deferred maintenance for your facilities across the state. We have mostly deferred maintenance in here, some requests for specific projects, absolutely. But most of this is to keep up the buildings that the state has built for the students of this state. And so we want to make sure that those buildings are not run down, because if they are run down, it would be more expensive to rebuild them than to simply maintain them.
Then as I moved along, I went through some of the pages 23 and 43. One is the priority programs that the different colleges and universities have. And the other one on 43 is the capital funding requests. Some of them are interesting if you look at some of those and go through them. And I actually read a good portion of them. I didn't realize we were in such dire straits in some of those places, and the cost to get some of those done is going to be expensive. And I guess we go through the legislative process to get those dollars, correct, Keith? I mean, that's the only way we can do it. And I went through priority one through some of them, one section's 8 or 9, and the same thing with the other one. It's interesting. I guess the last part I had goes back to page 20 again. And one of the questions I had, because it was all, I said jumbled together, it's probably not the best word, but all tucked in together. The part dealing with the Connecticut State Universities, the number, Keith, was 185 million ballpark in 25, 233 and 233 and change in 26 and 7. And one of the things that you did, I had asked for and you broke out, was how much each one of those universities will receive or not receive. And they're all pretty close. Central, Eastern, Southern are all pretty close as to the needs and what they're expecting. However, Western was 55 million in change in 25, and they're down to 40 million in 26 and 27. How about just giving a brief reason for that and how that's worked?
Sure. What we showed on the slide in FY25, the numbers that added up to $185 million was the block grant portion of the university's funding. That $156 million in temporary support included almost $72 million worth of temporary support for the universities. For Western, that temporary support amounted to $22 million, probably about $6 million more than they would have gotten otherwise. Because if you recall, Mr. Chairman, we wanted to help out Western get through some of its challenges. So that's why the numbers that we are planning for them to receive in 26 and 27 will be lower than 25 because they will not get that extra $6 million that System Office provided.
We already gave them 10 million in reserves, correct?
Not 10 million, but 6 million from System Office reserves and some other funds from what we were going to use for the retirement incentive.
And the other piece we didn't get, and I know it's, I asked you late, but would be the same kind of breakdown for each one of the institutions in the Connecticut state.
That's fine. So what I can tell you is that I didn't put it in the slides, but for FY26, of the $233.8 million, Central would receive around 72 million. Eastern would receive around 41.5. Southern would receive around 70.6, and Western would receive around 40.8. The reason why I'm saying around and would, because we are also thinking about redoing our distribution model based on performance. The board had called for a desire to see funding be tied to performance. We had shared with the board chair an outline of what that would look like. Happy to share that with you as well, Mr. Chairman. But we've been working with the CFOs to talk about what that performance allocation model would look like. So while I'm giving you projections based on how that 233 would be allocated, that allocation has not been yet determined.
Okay, but this 233 is basically where you are right now with the 4 universities, etc.
That's how much we are requesting from the state that would be.
You don't understand. The other piece though is the one from the Connecticut state. Their piece is, where am I here? Their piece is 264.6 million.
That's correct.
Okay, how does that break out? And I don't expect it. Right?
Well, CT State is now one college with 12 campuses. So,
but each campus has.
I don't know. Well, each campus's request presumably would roll up to the CFO office at CT State, and they make their own determinations for distributing those funds based on their own strategic initiatives, changes that they're planning for each campus, et cetera.
And that's fine, but I still think it would be nice if we, as a finance committee and the board, is aware of how much each one of those campuses are requiring.
I can work with President Meduco and CFO Gary Kelly to provide those numbers.
Thank you. Any other comments by Brendan? You have a question or a comment?
It's really just a question of clarification. I think I do understand, but when you say drawdown of reserves, does that mean they will accumulate at a slower rate, or does it mean that the balance will actually go down?
It means the balance will go down, and to the extent there are surpluses, that would be used.
Okay, thank you.
I have a real thing about using reserves, but we do have a fair amount of money there, and this would be helpful to the universities and the college, so as you well know. Ted, you have a comment?
Yeah, so a couple of different points here. So one is on the list from Keith that has all of the spend. There are several items on there that are technology in nature, and they're basically talking about ongoing.
Ted, is there any way we can get a better? The resolution is not good that we're hearing. Is there another way, or could you move? I'm not certain what to do, but for clarification.
Yeah, I hope it's better. Without video, is it any better?
No.
No.
All right, hold on. I'll dial in then. Hold on. Or go to someone else. I'll dial in.
Okay, you hold on that. We're going to go to Charlene.
Thank you, Chair Balducci. So with respect to the use of the reserves, can you be more specific as to whether this is a planful bridge to get us from where we are to a sustainable spot in the future? Or is it merely a plug in which the issues will continue into the following biennium?
I would characterize this very much as a planful bridge. Both the expenditure reductions that we are planning and the use of reserves. This is planned to address what we expect to be $150 or more $1 million shortfall in the temporary support from the state. This is the plan that both state leadership and the board have called for from us to prepare for the expiration of the ARPA dollars.
So if I may just follow up, so it's your anticipation that if the reserves are used thoughtfully in 26 and in 27, that in 28, that the use of reserves or further reserves would not be needed because you would be at a spot of sustainability?
Sustainability based on current plan has a lot to do with what the state will provide the system in the way of support. And the reason I answer that vaguely is because I do not know what the CBAC costs will be, and I do not know what other initiatives the state will choose to implement and have us implement. So I would say that we are at a place where we can use reserves to help our mitigation effort. It is not likely that that can continue. So we're at a point where we'll use reserves as much as we can to get to that point of sustainability in FY 28. And we do not plan to use more reserves in we would not plan to use reserves in sorry, I keep hearing other people speak. Sorry, we are not planning to use reserves in FY 28 because we are expecting, Regent Casamento, that this plan for the biennium will get us to that point of sustainability by FY 28.
I would just comment back on that too, Charlene, is that I am not in favor of using these monies in 28 or 29 or whatever as we move forward. I won't say I'm absolutely against it because I don't know what's down the road and we could find ourselves in a bigger jackpot than we are right at the moment. But I would say I don't favor doing that we have to come up with, I know Lloyd and his folks are going to try to find a way so we can get on an even keel, having used these reserves at this point so that we can get the balanced budgets across the board for colleges and the university. Universities and the college.
Thank you for that. I certainly hope that actions that are taken by CSU lead to a place where the use of reserves isn't needed as part of a long-term strategy.
Correct. I agree with you.
That's
Thank you
our
for that.
expectation.
Ted, somewhere I know you're out there.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Now we can. Very nice.
Yeah, well, older technology sometimes is better, although it is a cell phone. But anyway, so the couple things I wanted to bring up. So one was on the list of spends are a bunch of items that have a technology component, and it's a strategic technology component. So I think that for all of those, they make assumptions about what the strategy is, which I know that we are in the middle of reviewing. Lloyd and others as part of this technology committee. So I think we should, before we put any of these numbers forward, I think this should be discussed with the committee. We do have a meeting this Wednesday to talk about those items in particular, because again, these are not small numbers. This is your number 3 list item and other items there.
So very good point, Regent Yang. I think, we submitted, the policy option budget was due October 1. So we made the submission contingent on board approval here today, obviously for Finance Committee, ultimately the full board later in the month. So one of our challenges is the timing of the state's process and when we get things approved. I think as we go forward, we certainly need to reconcile this process with the tech committee's work. and make sure that the tech committee is able to weigh in on budget submissions in advance of the submission itself. So very good point, Regent Yang. In this instance, I think we had not considered the tech committee as we've developed our budget moving forward. We only considered what the finance committee needed to approve.
Okay. And on that note, this is a comment regarding the timing of the distribution of the information here. We received these final drafts not even a week ago. As you know, I've been trying to get in contact with you. I've not been able to. I was able to briefly speak with Regent Balducci. I know Ari has also been trying to reach out and get in contact to have further conversation. But there are many items in here that, frankly, I have further questions on that we would be here for a long time. Maybe they're not all appropriate. I appreciate that. But the fact is, I'm not in a position right now to say yes to a lot of this stuff, right? I think we're being given, as you said, a document that you've already submitted, and then saying then that was October 1. So what is October 7th today? And then us basically say, yeah, that was good or that wasn't good, without enough time to actually go and review and even have a discussion with some of you about the items that you're asking us to approve. So there is a ton of detail in here. So even if you assume that I was doing nothing else this weekend, I think it would be a bad assumption for us to say that we would be prepared for this meeting. So I certainly am not to the degree in which I feel comfortable saying I'm good with these items. So that's just a statement, and just to say that I'm not comfortable approving this because I have not been able to do my duty in terms of full review.
Ted, let me ask you this question then, because this was submitted, it had to be submitted, what, the other day, the 2nd or whatever,
October
the
1st.
preliminaries?
October 1st.
October 1. And then what we were supposed to do is more or less go over this, make additions, deletions, or whatever. Understand. I also said to you, and I had questions myself, and I still have a few left about this. However, what we're doing, or I would say that as we look at this document right now before us, we approve it, and now you will have until the 24th? When's our full board meeting?
The 24th.
24th of November, October, excuse me. Between now and then, for you and any others to come up with ideas and thoughts, this would be on the table then for additions or deletions, amendments, etc., full discussion to move it forward. If we don't move it forward now, I think we run into a real problem, fiscal problem, as we go forward. We move this with the understanding that, for instance, Ari, you, Aaron, Stewart, whoever else wants to make comment, additions, deletions, or raise questions about this, we do it at that meeting. I don't see the 24th meeting as a 20-minute discussion and boom, we hit the gavel and it's done. I think it's an opportunity so that you and others can go through it, decide what kind of comments or questions you want to add or delete from this document, and then we take action then. If there's a problem at that point, then we'll have to either delay it or have another meeting on it. But to not do it now so that we cannot have it before us for further discussion, Ted, at the October full board meeting, I think would pose a problem. I don't think you want to do that. I know I don't, because we're going to need some of this material, some of these dollars to help pay as we move forward.
Yeah, so let me just give Ari a chance to chime in if he would like to, regarding his opinions about whether he's prepared or not on this before I respond to that.
Ari, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to get that mute button. I would just sort of echo, Regent Yang's comments. There's just a lot here, and we're, just it feels like once again we're sort of getting this with our backs up against the wall. So it is an uncomfortable position.
I understand that, but now you have a gap, a time lag between today, the 6th, and the 24th of the month to spend time to look at it again, because you'd be asked to do that again. And either we move it forward then with additions or deletions, or we end up with an issue that the chairman and the rest of the board decides what we have to do. If we stagnate it right now, we don't accomplish anything. I think you, Ari, with the ability you have, particularly in IT, and Ted, additions and deletions, we can do that. And I feel comfortable doing that because I respect both of your opinions on that. We do it at the full board meeting with a full discussion and the availability of adding or deleting, or at that point, we have to put it on the table and say, let's let it rest. We can't reach a resolve today. Comments back?
Well, look, I would, I feel like this is a, process related issue here. We kind of keep circling back around. My view is the committee should be doing the work and putting forward a product to the full board that the entire committee is 100% behind. And the idea that we're sort of preliminarily putting it forward, where then people on the committee then need to go do their separate work and then bring it to the full board for additions, deletions, and edits, just doesn't feel like the right way this process should be working. And we're once again in a position where there's it feels like a risk to the operation of this system by having to speak up, which is an unfair position to put members of the committee in. And I think it's the responsibility of the committee to do the work before we come here on the 7th for the vote. Now, not owning a DeLorean with a flux capacitor to go backwards even puts me in a harder position, because I understand your point about the need to move forward on a budget, but this is where we are. And so I'm in a position where either I have to hold my nose and put forward something that's unprepared, or take this other option, which has other negative consequences. So it's just an unfair position to put members of this committee in.
Lloyd, do you want to make a comment?
I appreciate the concerns raised by those on the tech committee. Typically, our process has been to work with the institutions to make sure that what is included in the capital request is included. We have an idea based on our own master planning and projections in terms of what facilities need work. We put together an initial list. We share that initial list with the institutions. They make the modifications based on what their priorities are in terms of capital investments. And that's what you see in this capital budget request. Certainly, we can do more socializing of these documents with multiple committees of the board rather than just the finance committee.
Well, just to be clear, Lloyd, I want to be clear that this is not about, I'm not objecting as a member of the technology committee. I'm objecting as a member of the finance committee.
I ditto on that. I appreciate that, Ted. I didn't mean to step on you there, but I just wanted to get that out as well. I don't want this to be a tech committee comment only. This is a member of the finance committee. I'm making my comment.
Fair point. Fair point. So in terms of the timing and the lateness of getting these materials to you, I will take responsibility for that. I have to review these materials before they go out, and sometimes my plate is full and things slip. So I will take responsibility for the delay in getting these materials out to you.
Well, I understood. I've understood. But I just want to point out, though, again, if these went beyond the walls of CSU on October 1, we should have seen those October 1, right? Or we should have seen it before October 1. Now, I feel a little bit like a broken record, because if someone can pull the tape, I made similar comments, or I made similar comments to exactly the ones I'm making right now a few months ago, when the last time this same exact process problem happened. And we were again asked to do the exact same thing that we're doing now. Now it was under a different chair, so it was a bit of a different thing. So I would propose, and as much as, listen, I am as busy as all of you, and I don't want this as much as, I do not want another meeting, but I think perhaps the only way we can do this, as well as respecting the members of this committee and the process, is to have another meeting of this finance committee special session before the general board meeting, right? So that we can approve this, but then that we would have our chance beyond this date, beyond these few minutes today, to address our concerns, make edits or whatever, to preserve what Ari said and what Chair Balducci said as the prerogative of the Finance Committee to properly review and approve this. That's why I'm putting it on the table. But again, I'm telling you, I really don't want another meeting. But listen, when we face with all the choices here, I'd rather we did that.
Okay, appreciate that. Appreciate that comment. Did you have a comment? No, you want to say anything?
Well, so we can work to revise the process to make sure that we give people the time that they need to put the scrutiny they need into our requests. We can do that. So.
All right, but that doesn't resolve this problem that we have before us right now, revising the process. I don't have, actually, I do have a problem, but I don't know if I'll be out of the country for a couple of weeks visiting my son. But what I'm going to suggest is that if we have to have another one and I'm able to do it, I think we should do that. We'll find a date and a time in order to have that meeting. I mean, it is what it is. I understand the comments by both of you. And you're members of the committee. You're as important as I am, except I happen to be the one that reads the list of issues we're going to take. So we're all equals on this committee, and we'll find a way to come up with a resolve or an answer to that. Before I go any further, Pamela, you have a comment?
Just a question of process and work that needs to be done and the timing of these issues. As we are going to be trying to get a special Finance Committee meeting scheduled in early November to hear President Maduco's final proposal for the reinstatement of student services. Is there a negative or a timing deadline for this committee to address or approve this resolution? So because the submission to OPM was contingent on board approval, must it be done in October, or can it be added to the special Finance Committee meeting in early November as we consider President Maduco's proposal?
I think the delay for November is satisfactory, Pam, because OPM will not yet submit their budget to the legislature until well after November. So I think November will be sufficient for approval.
So then I put that on the table. It gives this committee additional time to explore. It gives the technology committee additional time to consider the items that are technology related on the capital infrastructure proposal. And it does not add an additional meeting to your already busy schedules. So that would be my suggestion, is to add this. We can table this resolution and staff report for a special Finance Committee meeting in November, at which time we'd be having a meeting. We have not scheduled it yet.
Okay. Does that work for everybody? Ari and Ted?
So yeah, my hand was up to ask the question. So that means that this would not come to a vote on the 24th in the board meeting currently scheduled. So I just want to confirm that this would be related to that.
I am making that proposal without discussing it with the chair or with the chancellor, but that would be a suggestion that we can bring forward.
Yeah, Ari, that's the way I would see it, that we do that. The only action items we would have for the 24th would be the two Manchester and Eastern ones that were discussed earlier by Keith. This one would be on hold until the November meeting. Does that?
Not knowing all of the potential knock-on effects of that decision or potential collateral damage, I'm okay with it based on what I just heard about the budget submission, that it doesn't have any negative consequences to the system, either in terms of our inclusion in the appropriate OPM budget, therefore for that approval, or any critical infrastructure support delays that would damage the ability for students to get services or the faculty to deliver classes. So if that's the understanding and we're aligned on that, then I am supportive. And then Chairman Balducci and CFO Lloyd, I think we should have some conversations offline on how we can be better prepared for the next meeting so that we can we can come educated and ready to vote.
Thanks, Ari. Charlene, did you have a
Thank you,
comment?
Pam.
I guess what I would just say is the proposal, the request we received on August 30th, 2024, which included the current services and the capital requests. OPM has already started meeting and reviewing these materials. So what I would recommend is that it sounds like there's a revised timeline and some of the August 30th submittal may be revised. I would recommend that you send an official request to Mike Zadi, our principal budget analyst at OPM that handles the CSU financials, so that you could propose what you think the timeline is for revising the documents, and he can advise how late we can receive them, given that we're already making some decisions and proposed decisions related to the materials that have been submitted. So that would be my recommendation, but before you're scheduling meetings, is really just to understand the timelines are in statute. They do not change. They're consistent across state government. And there's a presumption in all of the hard work that OPM and other stakeholders do to put the budget together, that the timelines will be complied with. But that said, it sounds like there's an extenuating circumstance. I think you need to make that official request and let our budget team make a decision as to what is a workable solution for them.
Good idea, Charlene. I think that works, right? We could do that. Yes, that makes sense. Thanks, Charlene, for those comments. Okay. So now the suggestion is, Ari seems to be a workable item for Ari, and I imagine Ted, where's Ted? Did he disappear?
I'm still here.
Okay.
He's here.
That this not be brought up at the next meeting. It is not an absolute critical item that has to be dealt with between now and the end of October. Excuse me. It can be dealt with later on, hopefully before the end of November. Why don't we do that if that's okay with you? We table this item for a November meeting with the full committee and move forward with that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, that way you, me, and of course Lloyd and his group have an opportunity to do that. And I think maybe some online calls would not hurt, directed at Lloyd and his team as to the kinds of thing you're looking at, Ari, and the kinds of things, Ted, you're looking at. And I'll talk to him on a couple things I have on my mind that are still questionable for me. Is that a fair statement?
Sounds good.
And
Okay.
Dr. Blanchard, you'll, and Committee Chair Balducci, you'll speak with Chair Gui and Chancellor Chang?
Yes. Okay, so what we're going to do is we have two items we've already voted on. Those will be the only action items this committee takes on the 24th. We're going to table this item to a future date in November. We haven't picked that out yet. We'll work on it so that it works for everybody involved and take action at that time. That makes sense? Okay, so I would put that in the form of a motion that we table the budget item that we have before us to a future date in the month of November with the entire committee and those people that are affected by it that need to or feel they need to be attendance in the meeting. I make that as a motion. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second. Thank you. No further discussion, I think, is necessary. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, the motion carries. That's the end of, unless there's any new items or any new material any of you want brought before us. I would appreciate that. Either that, I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn the committee meeting. Any other comments by any members or any of the folks here on the call? Hearing none, I'd ask for a motion for adjournment of the committee, Finance Committee meeting.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
thank you. Motion made and second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Your live stream is stopped.
You want to chat about this?